and a flush draw.
Strong hand, but he's checking to the razor. Jason's flopped the second nut flush draw.
Mercier bets 2,100. Bonomo quickly calls.
Justin just called because he thinks he might have the best hand and he doesn't want to chase Jason out, especially since he has a high chance of improving.
The turn, 3 of spades. Bonomo checks again. And Mercier checks.
That card missed them both. They're checking for pot control.
9 on the river.
Justin's now made 2 pair.
Fires 6,000, and that gets Mercier to fold.
Mercier's diamonds on that hand turned out to be more like cubic zirconia.
Jason wishes he was Justin now because he'd be on a rush and have a profit instead of a deficit. See if the Bonomo train will keep steaming along when we come back. Welcome back to the big game, where we have played exactly half of the 150 hands. Justin Bonomo has turned the biggest profit, while Joe Cada has simply turned and ran away from the table. Frustrated and losing, he's gone. Meanwhile, our loose cannon, Nadya Magnus, has had a strong showing. She's up over 13K. Alongside Joe Stapleton, I'm Chris Rose. It is time to check the halftime stats. And Joe, even though we've only played 75 hands, what's caught your eye so far?
So glad you asked, Chris. I always like to check out who's willing to splash around out there by looking at the VPIP, which gauges how often a player voluntarily puts chips in the pot. Justin Bonomo, our big winner so far, has been the guy most likely to throw his hat into the ring, but the numbers are all pretty close here as everybody seems pretty comfortable getting in on the action, even though their playing styles are very different. For example, if we look at 3-bet percentage, which tells us how often a player raises a razor pre-flop, we can see that Jason Mercier is trying to bludgeon this table. His 15% is by far the highest, and that pre-flop aggression has really helped him chip up throughout the session, even though he's down right now due to that big pot with Danny.
So Jason is really bullying this table.
Well, Chris, that's true pre-flop, but if we look at aggression factor, which measures a player's aggression after the flop, Mercier all of a sudden becomes least aggressive. What this tells me is that since he's playing such a wide range, instead of continuing to keep the pressure on, he's often checking and calling post-flop with hands that have marginal showdown value. In other words, he's trying not to get raised off a hand like middle pair or ace high that might actually be best.
Another surprise, Joe. The player at the table with the second highest aggression factor is actually our loose cannon. What are your impressions of Nadya's play?
Nadya's statistics generally put her in the middle of the pack, but what I'm noticing is that she does not seem intimidated in the slightest. After a cautious start, she's really hit her stride.
And it'll be very interesting to see whether or not she can maintain her composure and continue to play at a high level, especially if her stack begins to fluctuate.
In for Joe Cada is high-stakes limit specialist Joe Cassidy.
Welcome to the big game,
Hello.
sir.
Welcome to the big game.
Can I call you New Joe?
New Joe C.
That's the Joe seat.
The Joe C seat.
I play all Joes the same, so it really doesn't affect me.
True story. We mentioned earlier Barry's son, Joe Seabach. Barry regularly beat him out of his allowance money.
That's Seabach with an S. Mercier with an M raised to 1,400. Joe C folds. Danny, out of here. Nadya on the button. Ace-3 offsuit. Folds. So does Justin. Barry makes the call with King-10 suited.
Barry looking to take Jason's allowance money.
2 to the flop. 6-10-4. Barry checks. Top pair.
Top pair versus a draw. This should be interesting.
Jason bets 2,100.
Jason's open-ended.
Barry raises to 6,000.
It's a thin check raise for value. He's hoping Jason has a small pair.
Mercier calls.
Jason's got good implied odds if he hits his straight. Barry may keep the pressure on, do the betting for him.
The turn completes Jason's straight.
Now, if Barry was putting him on a small pair before, this deuce won't matter to him. He's going to keep firing.
Barry does fire 10,000.
Barry thinks this is a value bet. Jason now has the nuts. He's trying to figure out how to get max value. He doesn't want to chase Barry out of this pot.
Mercier comes over the top to 24-5.
Because Barry check raised the flop and then let out on the turn, Jason's putting him on a hand strong enough to call this raise.
Greenstein calls.
Barry makes the call because he thinks top pair is good a lot of the time against Jason's range.
The river, the ace of diamonds. Barry checks.
This ace doesn't change anything for Jason. He still has the nuts. Gonna try to get max value.
I'm all in.
Jason Mercier moves all in.
Jason was a little short going into this hand, so he had less than the size of the pot to bet. It's gonna be tough for Barry to get a read on him based on his bet size.
How much, yeah?
I think it's 42.
Now, if Barry's considering calling, it's because there are some busted draws out there. Barry is getting decent odds to call. He's getting 2.5 to 1. That means he only has to be right 2 out of 7 times to make this call profitable. So all it comes down to is how often Barry thinks Jason is bluffing in this spot.
All right.
Barry folds. Jason Mercier rakes in a nice-sized pot.
Barry came to the conclusion that Jason simply wouldn't bluff often enough in that spot.
And just like that, Jason is out of the red and into the black.
Is that how every pot's been at this table?
Not quite.
Like 75% of the pots.
Way to try to scare the new guy. Except Joe Cassidy is a high-stakes limit player. I don't think it's going to work.
The action this hand will begin on the new guy, Joe Cassidy. He folds. Danny Alaei, very quiet so far. Nadya folds. Justin Bonomo, pocket tens, raised to 1,400. Barry folds. King 8 suited for Jason Mercier.
Looks like he's not going to be letting go of this big blind very easily.
Mercier re-raises to 4,700.
He knows Justin's opening range on the button is very wide, but by 3-betting, he takes control of this pot and can be the aggressor post-flop.
Bonomo's not going anywhere. Calls with his pocket tens.
There are a lot of different flops Jason can bet now, get Justin off his hand.
8, ace, 7, 2 spades.
Jason was the aggressor, and now he's flopped a pair.
Comes out firing 5,200.
Jason's been 3-betting enough that Bonomo may not believe he has an ace. That would make his